And welcome to tonight's edition of the Robust Opposition. I'm very pleased to have with me two activists who I spent some time with last month in Washington, D.C., when I went to protest well, actually, it was not so much protesting. We were doing citizen lobbying in Congress. We were trying to get, specifically that week, it was International Women's Day week, and we were trying to get women who were members of the Progressive Caucus who supported reproductive rights to sign on to a ceasefire resolution. There were 24 of them, and I believe by the end of the week, we got about 8 of those 24. So we made progress, but we had a lot of pushback. And we're going to be talking about some of the pushback with my two guests here tonight. Parallel to me is Julia Norman, who is a young student, a graduate student at American University in Washington, D.C. How you doing tonight, Julia?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, Lauren. It's great to be here.
Well, I am so pleased to have you on, as I am to have on Cynthia Papermaster, who I've known, it seems like forever, at least 20 years, when I used to live in California. And Cynthia's up in the Bay Area, and we worked on many causes together. And she's a longtime peace activist, and she's 77, I just found out. So this was amazing. We have such a broad range of ages here, fighting the good fight, trying to stop the genocide in Gaza. So I would like my guests to talk a little bit about themselves, sort of give a brief bio and what brought them to this issue. And we will do, what is that expression, age before beauty? So we'll start with you, Cynthia. Not that you're not beautiful. We're all beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful trouble, they call us.
Talk about my activism. Yeah, I went to the University of California at Berkeley during a time when the free speech movement was happening, the second wave of feminism was happening, ethnic studies, the Black Panthers, opposition to the Vietnam War, and what they called sex, drugs, and rock and roll. All of that was happening. And I was in the midst of it here in Berkeley, where I still live. I didn't do all of those things, by the way. I did a lot of them, though, and I was exposed to a lot of new thinking, especially the idea of questioning authority. And I really lived and breathed all of that ferment and all of that sort of, revolutionary thinking going on. Another idea that I was exposed to and I studied was nonviolence and the tradition of nonviolence in activism. And that has really stayed with me as well. And I'm very committed to that. I'm committed to nonviolence in my work as an activist. Lately, I've been, for the last 15 years or so, I've been very active with Code Pink Women for Peace. I'm a coordinator for Code Pink in the San Francisco Bay Area, not only organizing actions, but supporting other people to do actions. And I love being in action with Code Pink. It's a great home for my activism. We're women-led, we're feminist, anti-militarism, anti-patriarchy, anti-imperialist, all of the antis, but on the other side of things, we are pro-peace economy, substituting a peace economy for the war economy that we're certainly in the middle of living in, which is sapping all of our resources towards war and weapons and misery in the world. We want to substitute a peace economy where people can live in true security and thrive and peace and, collective organizing and love for their communities. And that's basically it for me. I also have a daughter. I'm a mother. She's 36. I love her very, very much. She's brilliant and beautiful. I have a cat and a dog, and I have a wonderful family. Thank you very much, Lauren.
Yes, and we'll talk about your service dog, Lucky, who is with you in both places. Very nice dog. And now let's go to Julia. Julia, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing there in DC, and also what brought you to this cause.
Well, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Cynthia. I am also a UC Berkeley alum. I went there for my undergrad, so that's a cool connection that I didn't know. I'm currently a graduate student studying global environmental policy at American University. I'm finishing up, should be graduating in May. My focus is on sustainable food systems. So I've been familiar with what has been going in Gaza, what has been going on in Gaza from a food sovereignty perspective, and that has been the lens at which I've looked at this issue. And the unfolding famine has been such a testament to the fact that Gazans have always struggled to have access to land and seed, and their food security has suffered because of it. So that was kind of in my consciousness. But like Cynthia, I think that I am always oriented towards peace. I'm wearing my Pieces in Every Step sweatshirt. I consider myself like a student of Plum Village and Thich Nhat Hanh. And after October 7th, when the conversations on my campus, particularly at a school of international service, weren't happening, that was very alarming for me. Whereas the violence was seemingly escalating to a degree that I had not seen in my lifetime yet unfold. And I'm now kind of having a re-education of the fact that what is going on, the genocide at present, is kind of a continuation of American imperialism and the state of affairs with Israeli occupation and continuing targeting of Palestinians for a really, really long time. But for me, this has all been extremely alarming. And what has driven me to activism in the DC context was the fact that I was originally focused on campus efforts. I was trying to organize congressional letter writing campaigns. I was pushing my faculty members to have teach-ins, talk-ins for our academic community just to respond, because we have a lot of literature about genocide. We have a lot of literature on peace and conflict resolution. It's a topic that we like to explore. Our school's motto is waging peace. And yet, in this time when it would feel like praxis would be most important and that would come to fruition, our university was actually implementing new policies to limit free speech, to suppress protest. Our Students for Justice for Palestine organization on campus has faced a ton of doxing and harassment. So those were all kind of red flags for me. And after Aaron Bushnell self-immolated outside the Israeli embassy, which is very close to where I live, very close to our school, and our university paradoxically responded by not addressing it and then issuing policies that same week that further cracked down on free speech and limited the amount of posters we could put up, and the list goes on. I just decided that I had had enough of trying to push on my campus, which included tons of emails to administrators that were never responded to. And instead I would shift towards the Capitol, and Code Pink, as Cynthia mentioned, was an organization that I had seen online, and I just have now been going there every single day. It's an incredible group of women and men committed to activism, and I have found a fast home there and a sense of purpose. Whereas, universities, as Cynthia described in her experience, were a place of progress and activism and conversation. In my experience in 2024, they have been a place of silence, of fear, of now having to really oppose kind of administrative tactics to quiet everyone as much as we can.
And that is by design. I read a very interesting article today in Truth Out that I'll put into the comments about Israel's 4-point plan to stop campus activism, whether it's doxing students as they did with those Harvard students, calling law firms where those law students were accepted and getting their acceptances rescinded, or having big donors withdraw money. Millions of dollars were withdrawn from the Harvard endowment. Not that they need it, they're like a $30 billion endowment. Or trying to shut down chapters of Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace. I had Layla Saliba on my show. She's a Palestinian graduate student of social work, and she's faced constant harassment there at Columbia. And even to the point where when they were protesting one day, they got sprayed with the skunk spray, which is something that the IDF uses. And they had some former IDF students, IDF soldiers who had matriculated to Columbia, and they were implicated. And the university didn't even want to do anything about this until it made the papers. So it's really, really terrible, and so the opposite of what campuses are supposed to be: free speech, free expression, free association. And so let's fast forward to what happened. Well, actually, let's start with you, Cynthia. What happened at Nancy Pelosi's house in San Francisco? Because that happened in February, even before you came to Washington.
Right. Okay. I organized action at Nancy Pelosi's house for Valentine's Day a few days before, on February 11. I called it Pink Slipping Pelosi for Valentine's Day. And there were a lot of elements of that action. It was at Nancy Pelosi's house. She doesn't have an open office. The federal building in San Francisco has been closed for at least 3 years now. You can't even go inside the federal building. You can't go to her office. You can't have any contact with her or her office staff. And so as a result, we've been going to Nancy Pelosi's house in San Francisco. And it's been okay to do that. This action on February 11 was pretty large. I think we had about 80 people RSVP for it on the Code Pink website. And I organized it. There were a lot of elements. We had a wonderful skit with one of the candidates running against Pelosi playing Nancy Pelosi in the skit. Other characters were the CEO of Lockheed Martin and Chevron, General Mark Milley of the Pentagon. Anyway, this skit was great. And we also, thank you, there we are. Well, that's a previous day where we were on a fast. And on that day, on February 11, I ended my 20-day fast for Gaza. I had been taking in 200 or less calories a day for 20 days, which is starvation. Sorry, I get a little choked up when I think about it. And just liquids. And then I baked some scones, not drones, and muffins for the folks who came up. We chalked the sidewalks very colorfully. We wrote Valentines to Pelosi with, people just wrote what they wanted her to know, which was to stop the genocide and stop funding it and call for a ceasefire, which she has refused to do. There I am with my my blood red hands. And then we poured diluted washable tempura paint on the sidewalk and the street, which is legal to do because it's washable paint. But in a fit of anguish, I got overwhelmed with grief, anger, just a kind of anguish. And I put my hands in the paint, and then I started putting my handprints on things, including her garage door. And now I'm being charged with 2 counts of felony vandalism.
Mm.
It was all videoed. We had a wonderful videographer with us, Art Koch, and he had drone shots from above showing the paint everywhere and the people. And so it's all the evidence is on the video. And yeah.
Now, I don't have a copy of that video, but to share with the viewers, but I could put it into the comments if you send it to me. Mm-hmm. You initially thought you were just going to be charged with a misdemeanor. In fact, when I saw you in March, that's what you thought you were going back to face. And then you did what you did in DC. And I think that has something to do with the escalation of the charges. No, it doesn't?
I don't really know, but I called the San Francisco Police Department after a month after February 11, because I didn't know anything about what was happening with that misdemeanor. And the officer told me that it had now become a felony, 2 counts of felony vandalism. So I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't called them to find out. And he advised me to turn myself in to be arrested so that I could kind of control the arrest. Otherwise, if I were stopped for some reason, I could be arrested right there on the spot. So I did. I turned myself in. I spent 2 days in jail. I was finally released on my own recognizance after 9 o'clock at night. After the court ordered me released on my own recognizance, I spent another 4 hours in jail.
Mm.
And all that time, my friends were waiting. They came to court to see me. They were told I wasn't on the docket. I mean, the whole thing was really confusing for everyone, especially me missing my dog for all that time.
Your service dog, who you
Yeah,
need.
dog.
Yeah.
I need to be with him 24/7, and that was anguish for me. But nothing compared to what the people in Gaza are experiencing. And the people in Gaza don't have anything to eat. The people in Gaza can't take a shower. It's freezing cold there. There's starvation. Children are being killed. With our tax dollars,
Yeah.
we're buying the weapons that are bombing them, and white phosphorus and Hellfire missiles and constant drone surveillance, and all of that is traumatizing. So my little trauma, my little ordeal is really nothing. And I kept remembering every second that I was in jail.
Yeah.
And jail is a horrible place to be, but nothing like what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. That happened to me too in Sacramento. I think I told you the story, but I've recounted it before. I don't need to recount it, except for the fact that, it was I wasn't even protesting. I was live streaming the Poor People's Campaign. They were doing a disruption in the California State Senate. I was on the complete opposite side of the gallery from them so that I could get a good angle. And they targeted me first because they didn't want me to live stream how they were going to be arrested.
Yeah.
So we were put in jail as an example, and we were never charged. And, we were told that it was really just to make it very difficult and make us think twice about ever protesting again. Now, Julia, I want to, before we talk about what you did because we have a 5-minute video of it, Cynthia, I want to switch back to Julia to talk about, your experience. When I met you, you were there with Doctors Against Genocide, and we did a little press conference outside this hearing, and you said your piece, and we went around from office to office. Talk about that before we get into the disruptions that you actually did. What did it feel like for you to walk? Well, first of all, when we went in there to try to meet with a member, and we usually had to meet with a staffer, and then maybe talk about what it was like to maybe accost I think it's an accurate word, accost a member because they wouldn't stop and talk to you as you're walking down. Oh, I wish I had that thing where he called you a terrorist. I should have asked you to send. Maybe I'll message Melissa and ask her to send that, because that was priceless. So talk about your experience with the lobbying.
Yes. Well, I just want to say, Cynthia, I cannot believe that you were in jail for 2 days for that. And it's so disappointing because someone like Nancy Pelosi is the person that needs to be in jail if there is such, a person in this circumstance going to jail.
Amen.
But lobbying, I've been doing it every day. It definitely depends. I have learned that Congress is a hectic place. It's a really sad place. It weighs really heavily on my heart because the unfortunate thing is Nancy Pelosi and her policies, I think, she's kind of infamous, but she's actually not outside of the norm when it comes to how Congress people are voting on these issues and where basically they're bought out by whatever interests are funding their campaigns and where they invest their money. But aside from that, the lobbying, we go to offices. It depends on the day. Just today we were lobbying because a new resolution was put forth that wants to re-examine the U.S. relationship with South Africa. And the Congress people that have put this forth are all Congress people who are primarily endorsed by AIPAC. They're doing it because of the ICJ case, and that's explicit in the bill. So again, there's just these kind of crazy antics, but we go to office to office. Sometimes we have the opportunity to speak to chief of staff or foreign legislative analyst. That's really nice because those are the people who are advising the Congress people on these policies specifically, and they tend to know what's going on. However, I would say that they tend to know what's going on from the same kind of periphery sources that we tend to know. So sometimes there's like an exchange of information, which, I mean, at one hand, I appreciate, and then I feel like we have some kind of power to inform how they're getting introduced to certain ideas. And at the other hand, it's deeply concerning that, some of these offices are first hearing about a bill from us who are trying to lobby against it. And then the other portion of that is what you described, approaching, accosting members. For me, it's called bird dogging in like the Code Pink context. I kind of take a more reserved approach. I don't enjoy confronting people, but this kind of activism, taking actions, I just feel now is necessary. As Cynthia pointed out, what's going on in Gaza is beyond our comprehension. So like that degree of just being uncomfortable for me is a non-negotiable at this point. But what we do is go up to a congressperson, ask them about, at this point, we're kind of aware who has called for a ceasefire and who has agreed not to send weapons to Israel. That's unfortunately a minority. So we can go up with that information, ask them about why they're continuing to send weapons, ask them about why they haven't called for a ceasefire. And sometimes, as you alluded to, you get really absurd answers, like Congressman Harris, who, when I was asking him simply about Israeli war crimes and humanitarian assistance being blocked, called me a terrorist and said I was a Hamas sympathizer. And I asked him, that I'm not even using the word Hamas. So can we just talk about, children?
You were so polite to him. You kept calling him sir. So, sir, did you just call me a terrorist? Sir, I don't even have anything to do with Hamas. I'm asking you about, a ceasefire.
Yeah. So you do sometimes get that, but that, or we see Taz. Motaz is in a lot of our videos, and one of the videos that went really viral is Congressman Chuck Fleischman saying to his face, "Goodbye to Palestine. I will say it to your face, goodbye to Palestine," after he had just expressed that he's a Palestinian American who had lost family in Gaza. So sometimes we're able to capture these absurd, heartbreaking moments. But that I think is really important, both from to reveal to the American public, like these are your elected officials. But also I feel like, those instances give us a sense of how deeply entrenched like the Zionism is when they're so proud, and they're not shameful. Like they're unabashed in their willingness to say this to you.
And what was that congressman? I think his name is Brian Mast, and he's a double amputee, and he was basically saying, "Kill them all," right?
Yeah, he's kind of infamous. He's an ex-IDF soldier. I think that he enjoys this, to be honest. I don't know. His whole stance on this is kind of beyond me. Like, I just spoke to him last week, because every time you ask him about a ceasefire, he says some absurd thing about, we should shoot everyone and there's not enough weapons and whatever. And then this time I just asked him about the blocking of humanitarian aid, specifically U.S. humanitarian aid, and the fact that that breaks our law. I wasn't even going to try to appeal to his, very pro-arms stance. And then he outright advocated for a war crime. He said we should block more humanitarian aid. We should block it. And this kind of stuff to me is absurd because, they censored Rashida for saying "from the river to the sea" in October. And then you have other Congress people saying "goodbye to Palestine" or "let's block humanitarian aid." And there's absolutely zero repercussion for it. When this is genocidal or outright illegal, rhetoric, and they just get away with it.
And it's happening on all levels of government. I will tell you here, for 3 months, people have been trying to get a ceasefire resolution passed by the Asheville City Council, and they won't even put it up for a vote. People come, and last week, not yesterday, the meeting they had yesterday, but the previous week, They decided that they were going to limit the speeches to only 1 hour, take it down from 3 minutes a person to 2 minutes a person, unless you came with 3 other people, and then one person could speak for 10 minutes. And they decided they were going to make it equal, that they were going to balance the pro-Israel side with the pro-Palestinian side, even though the pro-Palestinian side was so outnumbered, the people and they let this guy who is, I just became aware of him yesterday because he made another crazy speech. I was watching it on Zoom, building these micro units downtown where you're renting 400 square feet without even a kitchen, and it's $1,000 a month. So anyway, he's a developer, and he was just making these insane rants about Nazi Germany and trying to equate the pro-Palestinian people in that council room with the Nazis, and it was just insane. I mean, if you're going to equate anybody with the Nazis, it's what Israel is doing right now. But of course, you can't bring that up because that's another thing. The Holocaust is a special thing that could only happen to Jews. And if anybody invokes it in any other context, it's heresy. But I want to go to the next level of the things that Code Pink does. And I've been watching Medea do this for, 2 decades now. I especially loved when she tried to arrest Henry Kissinger and put handcuffs on him. Or was that Dick Cheney? Or maybe she tried to do it with both of them. But she's just unflappable, and they're arresting her, and she's still talking real calmly. And you have adopted that tactic, Julia, as we will see in this clip right here. Okay, I'm gonna share the screen again. Okay. So this is a small window. I can't quite figure out how to make this video bigger, but you'll get the gist of it.
That is exactly the threat you are describing. They are blocking humanitarian aid.
I recognize people feel passionately.
Stop killing my people in Gaza. Stop killing my people in Gaza. Israel is the biggest threat to national security at the moment.
So that will not just be for Ukraine or European security.
Children are being starved to death. Don't support the extermination of Palestinian people. Stop sending arms to Israel. Stop supporting the starvation of children.
Israel is the biggest threat to global security, and we wanted to make that clear. They're conducting a genocide against Gaza, killing my people. I've had over 20 plus members of my family killed.
There's a humanitarian crisis, and this government is willing to continue to send weapons that is murdering children. So I'm getting arrested for this, when really all of the war criminals are there. Stop arming!
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry that I couldn't fill the screen with that. Eventually I'll figure out how to do that, but it's just amazing. And it's just like second nature for them to be doing this. I remember we were warned that we couldn't even bring in a camera, even to shoot a still photo, much less a video, at the one that I went into. And as soon as we opened our mouth, we were going to be hauled out. And I said, several people went, and I got the impression everybody's going now. We're on to the next thing. So I said my thing, and sure enough, I waited till I got to the door, and then he just sort of dragged me out. But I'm used to that sort of thing as well. And this was a hearing on global threats, right? And what were they talking about if they weren't talking about this?
Yeah, so this was a Senate hearing. They do it every year, and it was basically like the war cabinet. Director of the CIA, Avril Haines is the woman I interrupted. She is the director of national security, Biden's kind of main confidant. And so they were discussing the biggest threats, and of course the biggest threats are China, followed by Russia, and then I think later in the hearing they got to Iran. But certainly they weren't going to talk about Israel, and certainly they weren't going to talk about the genocide. And this was a planned disruption because this hearing was such a kind of rare event, and it was live streamed on C-SPAN and on CBS. We thought it would be worth, getting arrested for to interrupt. But right away, I mean, Avril Haines went into this long spiel about how Xi Jinping is a threat of like fascism and going into police state and the threat of violence. And it's very absurd to listen to these people, because I don't know if they necessarily even believe, the kind of propaganda that they have to put forth at all times. But to sit in a room on global threats in the context of what we are experiencing today, in which, I mean, we saw yesterday a UN Security Council ceasefire resolution was passed, and Israel is still bombing Rafah. Like they're ignoring international law.
Yes. And you have to watch the State Department briefings with the press. Ryan Grimm, a friend of mine who does a show called Counterpoints on a bigger show called Breaking Points, and he's also the Washington bureau chief of The Intercept, is in those hearings. And he asked a really good question today about, why is this non-binding? Or no, maybe I'm thinking of, that wasn't his question. He asked a good question. I don't remember what that question was, but Saeed and this other guy asked a question about why, this resolution is binding, but they're saying it's not binding. And it's like they're using all this Orwellian doublespeak to try to justify not doing anything about it. Like if it was something that we wanted stopped, then it would be binding for sure. But because we're supporting it, it's not binding.
It is binding.
Well, it is binding according to the UN,
Right.
And then he also was asked a question about the Special Rapporteur's report called Anatomy of a Genocide, which just came out, and basically called her, anti-Semitic. And the reference that he gave was because she was said right after October 7th how it was justified. Now, I'm sure he's conflating. She was probably explaining that it didn't just start on October 7th. She was probably explaining it, and they turned that into justifying it. It's the same way they conflate anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Now, after that happened, you just got cited and released. Is that correct?
I believe it's a misdemeanor charge. We went down, they do a whole dramatic thing. It's so silly. They take you into the police car, they drive you a block, they book you. It's just so ridiculous. And I was
Keystone Cops.
Yeah. Honestly, it wasn't a big deal at all. The only thing that was a bit frustrating was that me, Yossi, and Taz, the other two men you saw in the video, we all had cops who had begun that was their first week, so they had never processed an arrest. So they're filling out the forms wrong. They couldn't log in. It was just silly. But
when we were arrested, they left the jail cell open. They left the door open. And I was joking with Susan, who was with me, let's make a run for it. Of course, we didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to show what you guys did, Cynthia. This is a little bit longer. If I was editing this, I would have made it shorter. Maybe I won't play out the whole thing, but set up because it takes place when Medea is, removing the altar. Set up what happened, the first thing that you did when you set up this altar, which we will show in a second.
I got there a little bit after Medea was asked to take the altar down. When I got there, I was told that all these people arrived at Pelosi's office and the staff shut and locked the door and no one could go in. So when I got there, that was the situation. So I was knocking on the door and saying, let us in. We want to ask you to call for a ceasefire.
Okay, let me show it to you because it was videoed. Okay, so I'm going to do the sharing the screen thing again. And I'm going to go to this. And I can probably make this a little bit.
Oh.
So this is a altar that we're building to the
I understand what you're
children
doing.
of Gaza.
You know that. You've been around here long enough. You know you can't do this.
Well, I stand with Israel signs all over the place.
Listen,
so
you want to take that up with the members of Congress, you can take that up with the members of Congress.
That's why
you cannot do this. You know this. How long have you been up here now?
5 months while the
you've
genocide
been doing,
going on.
you can't put anything up. You can't desecrate anything. You can't put anything on that.
Yeah, we feel like the bombs we're dropping is what's desecrating United States. This is a tribute
Okay, take your
to
tribute down,
all
please.
the people who have been killed.
You can take it up with the individual officers.
They don't respond. They don't
They have
answer.
websites, right?
They don't respond.
Okay, they have email, they have websites. The other thing that you can do is that you can contact, the Sergeant Arms office, stuff like that. But it's not gonna be permitted, okay? It's a very big day today, State of the Union, it's not gonna be permitted.
Pelosi is one of the worst, the worst. And she has not met with her constituents who have asked her over and over again. In fact, they're so desperate that they go to her house and sleep outside her house. She's not held a town hall meeting in over a decade. She doesn't talk to anybody who doesn't give her money and doesn't believe in her pro-Israel stance of things. So, she is somebody who represents the worst of the worst here in Congress. And we were here to build an altar inside her office. People who flew from California because they can't get a meeting with her in her district office. And she locked her office and then called the police when we built an altar here. So Nancy Pelosi needs this eviction notice. And this eviction notice is telling her that the tenant charged with not calling for a ceasefire during a genocide in Gaza, conspiring to act as an agent of a foreign government, failing to support and defend the Constitution, also being guilty of insider trading, is therefore charged and must vacate the premises. So we tried to put this on her door, but the police won't let us.
Representative Pelosi, you have constituents waiting outside your door who traveled all the way here to talk to you. We want to ask you to stop funding a genocide in Gaza where thousands of children are being killed with our tax dollars that you keep voting for. Representative Pelosi, please open your door. I'm full of grief that Nancy Pelosi, one of the most powerful people in government, continues to fund lethal weapons to kill children in Gaza with our tax dollars. It fills me with grief to think that my tax dollars are being used to buy Hellfire missiles, white phosphorus, F-35 fighter jets that are killing people who are in an open air concentration camp in Gaza. And this is what Nancy Pelosi stands for. And we really cannot handle it. We say enough of that. Pelosi, you have to stop. Open your door. Open your door. Your constituents are standing outside your door.
We have tried. We have written the scheduler for a meeting. We have written the foreign policy person for a meeting. We have tried all the democratic paths to have a meeting. This is an act of desperation to sit in front of her office. People don't want to do this. They don't want to get arrested. They don't want to have to put this kind of display out to show what a despicable, quote, official Nancy Pelosi is.
She's supposed to be representing San Francisco. San Francisco just passed ceasefire resolution, and Pelosi still will not say ceasefire. We've gone to her house, and she just tells us, she shakes her finger and went like this to me. I said, I'm your constituent, and she went, go back to China.
Where your headquarters?
I came here from California. I'm disgusted that she won't open her door. What we're seeing every day is unfathomable, and I can't believe these people that are supposed to represent us can just turn a blind eye and turn away.
Well, you can't meet with Nancy Pelosi. Her federal building office has been closed for about 3 years now. You can't actually even go inside the federal building where her office is. But should we be able to go inside the federal building office, we would deliver petitions with thousands of signatures of San Franciscans asking for her to call for a ceasefire.
Take them around the corner.
Exactly.
Remember, you've been given your warnings. So if you start protesting, you're gonna get locked up. Free Palestine is a protest.
I don't know that anybody not see me. I came all the way to Washington, D.C. to see Representative Pelosi.
There's no safe place for the children. Gaza, free Palestine. Like Gaza did.
You know what? You're
Okay. So
Reliving it.
yeah. So yeah, you can't say free Palestine. Did you hear that? It's like you can't say from the river to the sea. That means genocide of the Jews. I mean, it's really outrageous. So what happened to you? And I want to let people know that it was so exciting because just the night before, I went out to dinner with Cynthia and Susan and Leslie and what was the name of your other friend?
Lucky.
No, not your dog. The other friend, the one who drove us, and we went and got the art supplies.
Josie.
Yeah, Josie, and she had rented an Airbnb to stay there for a while. She was real. She had a very moving story as to why she was there. But we were planning that whole thing over dinner at an Irish pub, and I didn't even go. I mean, I feel guilty that I didn't go because it turned out great. But so what happened? What happened to you after that?
It just what Julia experienced. It was being put in a little police van, driven about half a block away to the Capitol Police Station, booked, put in a jail cell. We had to take all our jewelry off. We couldn't have anything with us in the cell. I was missing Lucky like crazy. I'm never apart from my dog, and that was horrible. And yeah, like I said, they left the cell door open. They had us in there for about 20 minutes, fined us $50 and released us. Then I couldn't find Lucky after a while. After we were released, I couldn't find him for about an hour after, so that was even worse for me. But it was very little consequence. $50, not much, but I'm happy I did that action. I don't know if Pelosi even knows that it happened. Is one thing that really troubles me is that I don't think she's listening at all. She said to go back to China, where our headquarters are, when we asked her to call for a ceasefire. And then on national television about a week later, she said that ceasefire is Putin's message. That maybe there's some connection between Russia and these people coming to her house calling for a ceasefire, and she's going to ask the FBI to investigate people, which is a threat. It's like McCarthyism. It's very scary that she would say that on national television, and not just because I'm afraid of the FBI, which I am. It's also because people hearing that might think that I'm a Russian agent. And those people are people like Christian nationalists, right wing, like MAGA supporters or whatever. I don't even. People are crazy. They're crazy.
Those are the ones. Those are the ones they should be looking into, not peaceful activists trying to stop a genocide. And I feel like we're all coming from the same place, that we can't just watch this and do nothing. And what kills me is my friends who can, that just are going about their life these past 5 months as if nothing else is going on. And then you bring it up and they look sad and they say, oh, it's terrible. And, but it's so grating. I don't know why. I think it's just because I'm Jewish and it's such a perversion, excuse me, of a perversion of my Jewish values, that it should be defending Israel, excuse me, no matter what Israel does. That is so much of what American Jewry is about since the Holocaust. And I am, about to end probably one of the most significant relationships of my life, not a current boyfriend, but someone who was somebody, one of only 4 men who I feel like I've loved and who've loved me, and we've remained friends because he is such an adamant Zionist. And even after all this time, he doesn't even think anything's wrong. He doesn't even think anything's wrong. And I can't talk to you about this anymore. I've got to go to the gym. I'm like, how can you go to the gym? It's like, I'm signing up to go to Gaza on the flotilla until I find out that, there's a very good chance I could be shot by the IDF. So I'm definitely not going on the one that leaves April 15th before there's a ceasefire. But then they're doing a boat that goes around Northern Europe from port to port. And you're on it from one leg and you do all sorts of solidarity and lectures and films on the boat. and then you get off at the port and you take people and stuff, and then a new group comes on, and they continue. And the ultimate goal is to break the siege. And they've done this before. It's flotillas for Gaza. And in 2009, actually 40 people did get shot. No, I'm sorry, 9 people got shot. But they were 40 activists from Turkey who I think were planning to engage violently. So the ones that, were totally peaceful, I don't think anybody got shot. But what they do is they board the boat. Well, first of all, they tell you to go to a different port, and then you don't listen. And you just tell them that you're continuing on. Your whole purpose is to break the siege and deliver the aid. And then they tell you they're going to board the boat. They board the boat. They detain you. They bring you back to Israel, and then they deport you. So I think that's like the worst thing that could happen to me. And I think I'd be willing to go through that. But it's just amazing to me. I mean, have you too found that in your life, that there's people that you know that just are not even affected by this?
Cynthia, do you want to speak first?
Yeah, Lauren, I'm in a kind of a bubble, an activist bubble with Code Pink. I work night and day to try to end the genocide and working with Code Pink, and we're all involved and active around it. So I don't want to be around people who aren't interested. I don't want to be around people who think it's just something happening over there. No, I mean, but I do engage in lots of conversations with people who I don't even know, and I bring it up. There's like this common habit of saying, hi, how are you? And I always use that opportunity to say how I am. I'm really upset. And there's a good reason for it. And I am finding, Lauren, and this is so interesting to me, I'd say about 80% of the people who I bring it up with want to talk about it. They're not sure what to do about it, is their quandary. It's like, yes, I know it's happening. What can we do about it? And I always use that opportunity to say, here's some things you can do. And Code Pink is just growing incredibly because of this. Just the other day, a couple days ago, Condoleezza Rice was on campus at the UC campus, and a number of us went in and we disrupted, and 5 new people joined Code Pink because they saw that going on. And so this is an opportunity, because it's so intersectional, for us to really do a lot of collective action around this, a collective organizing around this. Labor's involved, Black lives involved, immigration activists are involved. I could go on and on. All of these different issues are coming together around this horrible genocide that we're paying for with our tax dollars. And I think if we could stop it, there's just so much power behind what we're doing right now. So that's what I'll share. Thank you.
How about you, Julia? Are you meeting people that in your day-to-day life that are oblivious, or, not necessarily oblivious, but are sort of, yes, that's terrible, and then they move on?
Well, I would echo Cynthia in that, it's a unique experience in DC, and that you are here in the heartbeat of the people who are voting to send weapons on a daily basis. There has been, the kibbutz outside of Blinken's house. I go to the Israeli embassy where there is another kibbutz. That is an incredible group of activists, community organizing. But I would say, yes, and because on a college campus, absolutely. Unfortunately, there was one day, and this day I went home and I had a good cry. I stood in the heart of our campus with some QR codes, and the QR codes were simply, send a letter to Congress to call for a ceasefire, or stop for an action in stop for an action in genocide. And the only students that stopped were those wearing keffiyehs. Other students, it was like an awkward thing. They acknowledged that this was occurring, but they acknowledged as well that they did not want to respond to to just pause. And so I do think that a lot of people sit comfortably, and I think our media has really facilitated this. And this is where I charge the media and universities as well as complicit in genocide, because on one hand, by universities equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and also suppressing free speech, they are stifling young people who should be one of our most active bases into complacency. And also, it's so skewed. I mean, I saw something the other day, and I know, again, like we're talking about Fox News, but still, when I walk into the Rayburn cafeteria in Congress and it referred to the siege on Al-Shifa Hospital, in which pregnant women are being raped and shot, as it had some number like 180 Hamas terrorists captured in Al-Shifa. And I was like, this is so shameful. Like, it's a blatant lie. And so that's where I go, I wonder, if you're not someone who is looking for the information because you are concerned, you might not even get anything on a regular basis that's telling you the truth unless you're looking for it because you know that it's there.
Yeah.
And you want to hear it. And so for that reason too, I've also just decided, like, my heart can't take those kind of things. So I'm now just like, I'm with Code Pink at Congress. In the afternoons, I'm at the Israeli embassy and I do my school. And that's kind of been all that I can do, because everything else, frankly, in the midst of the worst, like most unprecedented humanitarian crisis, but also just display of violence and hatred that I have ever experienced and hope to ever experience in my lifetime, everything else feels kind of silly. Doing anything else, it feels like, not as important. And that's not to say things aren't important and we all don't go on with our lives, but just that you also, I think we owe it to our humanity, as well as everyone in Gaza, to be responding to this as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I want to close talking about, if you guys see that it's what we're doing is making a difference, and if you see any hope. I can point to a couple of things that happened in the last week that I think are very hopeful signs. One is Chuck Schumer, calling for a new government in Israel. Of course, we need a lot more than that. But for Chuck Schumer in particular to call for that, it pissed off Netanyahu, I'll tell you that much. And then for the U.S. to not veto the ceasefire resolution, to abstain. Netanyahu called off his trip to Congress because of that one. And also even AOC, like a lot of people on the left are saying, why is AOC not sitting there with the other members of the squad at the State of the Union? And why is she clapping? I mean, it turns out she was clapping over something good that Biden did that she should be clapping about. But, the left and the circular firing squad, where we're always shooting our own, they were, castigating her. And there was even a video that went viral. She was coming out of a movie and they were following her saying, why won't you call it a genocide? Why won't you call it a genocide? And she just looked at him and she said, you're hurting your cause. Well, she made an amazing speech the other day on the floor of Congress and I think for her, it's the forced starvation, because that's what she was talking about, how this is really totally man-made. And let us not forget that there's actually 4 million people at risk of starvation in Sudan. So I don't want to say that this is the worst starvation event going on right now. It's not. But the fact is, it's totally man-made. It doesn't have to be. And this idea that they're building a port that's going to take another 60 days, or they're dropping food on people. I learned from, I don't know if it was your presentation or someone else's, Julia, that you can't just take a starving person and give them a hamburger. It could kill them. You have to medically reintroduce them to food. So, read a terrible account of a doctor who was in that hospital who said they absolutely have nothing there. And I feel like it's just becoming unpalatable to the point where American allies are dropping. Spain is against it. France is against it. Canada is against it. Ireland's been against it. The whole global south is against it. So it's kind of just like us and Germany, probably Australia. They're always with us. And I feel like the most recent poll showed, we know that the vast majority of Democrats want a ceasefire, and majority of independents. Now it's even 30% of Republicans want one, which is huge. It's like people just can't look at these images every day. So I feel like it's turning. I don't know where it's going to get. I don't know if it's going to get as far as we want it to get with him actually stopping the funding. We have 17 senators on board with stopping the funding. What is your opinion, Cynthia? Are you getting a little more optimistic about the way things are going?
You know, talk is cheap. And Biden, Schumer, you know, even Pelosi now is saying, oh, it's just terrible how these children are being starved to death. Talk is very cheap. I watched their actions, and they are still funding the weapons. They are still lining the pockets of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Grumman, Elbit, and all of the merchants of death are still making 60% profits, war profiteering on the starvation and genocide of a population. So I wish I could feel optimistic. I think that what I am optimistic about is how many people are going into action and taking action. And the one or two things that I see that are hopeful is the tax withholding pledge that I'm organizing with Code Pink and other groups. To just ask people to pledge not to pay their 2023 taxes, to file for an extension, which is really easy to do. And then it's like a petition, but it's saying we don't want to pay for genocide, war, and continual war any longer. We want to use our money for healthcare, education, affordable housing, clean energy, relieving student debt, all the things that we elected Democrats to do for us, which they haven't done. So I don't think they've done these things. So that's one really hopeful thing I see. And another is there's a planned economic blockade in like 20 cities on April 15 that I'm starting to see some information about. I don't know who's organizing it, but I think their bottom line is money and votes. I don't think we should be voting for any of these warmongers, but let's keep our money from them. Let's not fund a genocide or continual war any longer. Let's use the money for ourselves, for our planet, and for our people. So those are the hopeful things I see.
Julia?
What I would just add to that, one, I'd say we always have to have hope just because it's the only thing that keeps us going towards anything that has value. And I think what I am hopeful about is the fact that I think this is such an intersectional issue that I think it wakes people up to a whole array of crises. I think the Reject APAC campaign is something that excites me. I think just this like cognizance of like how corrupt our democratic representation is at this point is something that I feel like is a conversation being had even among like my peer group and young people, where I feel like or you know, the uncommitted campaign, just people showing up for elections in a different way is something that I take, you know, I find hope in, and this sense that maybe we all knew that there was corruption in politics, we just didn't realize like how corrupt, and that there really isn't a red line, it seems like, for so many of these people, because if there was a red line, we wouldn't be here today sending weapons to Israel in the midst of a genocide. And I think the other thing that gives me hope on the Hill is just where I see shifts in certain offices, and I see like after, and there's no way to know, you know, we can't control for the variable of these conversations, and obviously they're hearing about this from tons of different people in different angles, but like, you know, we had a really cathartic kind of Code Pink shaming session for Mr. Van Hollen after he went on the floor and gave such, you know, beautiful speech about his concern for the Palestinian people, and then turned around and voted to send more weapons. And so we followed up with him and had a very, you know, real conversation with that office. And there was an emotional reaction from his staff. And like, those are the kind of things that I think when you like see people's hearts and minds change, where like, you know, that there's a seed that they can't like, they can't no longer care to some degree. And you know, Van Hollen, it will, you know, when push comes to shove, we have to wait to see to another vote. But what he has done since then has been like leading what I would say is a courageous crusade defending UNRWA, and calling out the nonsense of the claims to try to cut it. And like, those are the kind of things. Or even when what's his name, McGovern, put a discharge petition to send more weapons on the floor. And we went in that office and had another very real disappointing conversation. And then he followed up the next day with a tweet telling Biden that we need to cease weapons to Israel. And these things you never know, you know, it doesn't even matter, but it's just to say, like, I do think the pressure, the constant pressure and disruptions from everyone, like, I think it would be what we need is every day, where any of these politicians are in any city in the United States, there needs to be ceasefire resolutions. There needs to be people interrupting and saying, why are you not acting? Because they are not representing their constituents. That's their job. Their job is not to get reelected or line their pockets, and doing so in the most horrific, like, there is nothing for me that I can imagine worse than this. On a daily basis, it seems to get worse, but this has to be a moment where we, you know, say, if not now, when, to use the line of the campaign.
Right. Well, yeah. And on that note, I am going to put up this information about how to get involved with Code Pink, because I highly recommend it. You can go to Washington, or you can do actions locally. The types of things that you see them doing in Washington can be replicated with your local representatives, although all mine are Republican and kind of useless. In fact, I remember when I was there in the halls of the Rayburn building, I told Jody that I was going to go talk to Chuck Edwards, and she's like, he's not on the list. You can't move him. It's a waste of time. And I said, yeah, but I would feel bad knowing that I came to Washington, D.C. and didn't even speak to my own representative. And I couldn't speak to his staffer. So I spoke to the receptionist, whose name was Lauren, and she was writing down all the notes. And I felt like I had done my part, you know. And I feel everybody should do that. You know, you can't just, it's not just a matter of voting. That is the minimal responsibility you have as a citizen. You can write letters to the editor. You could speak at public comment. You could join a protest. You could organize a citizen lobby meeting with your representative. There's so many things that you can do. And I've been doing them all. And that's why I call my show The Robust Opposition. So I want to thank you both, brave warriors for peace, although I hate to use the word warrior and peace in the same.
We're Shambhala warriors. We're Shambhala warriors.
That's my meaning, right? Okay. So I want to thank you for joining me on the show. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I'm going to close the show the way I always do by saying, keep fighting.
Peace.